it's the pettiness that destroys the presidential dignity. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the Virtue Signal. I'm Bill Whittle with my friend Alfonso Rachel, and we promise we won't put you through what we put you through last week. Zoe and I are still feeling the kind of the psychic and moral repercussions from that bath we had to take last week. So I thought for this week we'd do something something completely different. So I think by now everybody knows that Queen Elizabeth has passed away just a day or two ago as we record this. And there's a quality that she had, and many qualities, but I was trying to put my finger really on what the essence of that great woman was. And there's one word that comes to mind. I'll just preface this by saying this. Queen Elizabeth II, who they're already beginning to call Elizabeth the Great, which I think is profound. Elizabeth the Great was almost without, I don't know the exact details. She was, I'm quite sure, the richest woman in the world, and may in fact have been the richest person in the world when you consider what her legal ownership of property was. And of all the people out there on the political spectrum, she's the only one that I can think of, really, who had the actual ability to act royal because she was. In other words, I've seen Obama act very imperiously and so on, and you know, he grew up smoking doobies on the beach in Hawaii. This is a queen, and she has the legal, historical, and moral excuse to be arrogant, condescending, and so on. But she wasn't. And the word that keeps coming back to my mind when I think about Elizabeth the Great, and when I think about one of the many qualities missing in all of our society today, but most especially in the political leadership, and that word is dignity. Dignity. She's the only person out there who really had a right to argue about pronouns, because as Her Majesty the Queen, she would always refer to herself as we are not amused, that kind of thing. We. But here's the thing, Zoe. I realized that she was queen about a couple years before I was born. So she's been queen my entire life. I sang God Save the Queen for a quarter of my life when I went to schools in Britain. And my mom was a British subject till the day she died, and so is my uncle. And my grandfather was awarded the Order of the British Empire. So I have a half a dog in this hunt. But I never once saw the actual queen of the British Empire behave so condescendingly as anybody I've seen on TikTok lecturing me about whatever they want to lecture. So here's something you can do to be a better ally with blank people. Just the raw arrogance of what we see out there is just astonishing. And dignity is the quality of holding yourself above turmoil and pettiness, I think, would be a decent enough definition of it. And while dignity can sometimes, in fact, often leads to aloofness, that's kind of what we want in our leaders. We want leaders who are able to behave themselves and act as if they are in fact the leaders and not just some petty criminal family that's making deals with China and then getting standing in front of Independence Hall in front of blood red banners telling us that 74 million Americans are enemies of the state. Dignity is a quality I think that Ronald Reagan shared, and I can't think of anybody since him. I can think of a few people before him. Lyndon Johnson, not one of them. Parenthetically, by the way, Zoe, I think Queen Elizabeth met with either 13 or 14 presidents. She met with every president since she had been queen, with the exception of Lyndon Johnson, which I suspect was not an accident because he's tying Barack Obama and Joe Biden for the least dignified president we've ever had. But to put all that aside, right? What a quality for a leader to have is dignity. What a tremendous asset. And by the way, think about how much of actual power it gives to somebody who in the British system is essentially a figurehead. She's on the money. and she's on the stamps. She doesn't really have the regal authority or the legal authority to say, I am the queen and this is what I want. So her dignity, her royalty, her sense, her aura of majesty, that's why she's called Your Majesty, was essentially the whole parlor trick. And I'm not trying to make it sound like it was a fake deal. I just look back on this and think, man, I sure wish we had more people like that today in leadership positions. I wish we had people who could be above all of this stuff and had the discipline and the emotional character to not be drawn into these petty fights all the time.
Yeah, I guess that would be nice. And to be fair, I really don't know much about Queen Elizabeth. But one thing is for certain, I do not want my perspective of her shaped or dictated to by the left, who seems to hate her so much. Mm-hmm. And so that in itself is telling. When I examine who it is that they love and who it is that they hate, I tend to go in the different direction because they seem to be very skewed about a lot of things. So, but I mean, it's not something that I've paid a lot of attention to. There's enough going on in my life to be able to. It's like I'm not caught up with with the Queen or any royalty of any other nation, to tell you the truth. But I think I can maybe speak a little bit towards representation about rather than I don't like to think of these people in office as leaders. It's not a leader that I'm looking for. These people are supposed to represent us. And, just the same way as the Queen is a figurehead, she represents something, as she would say, we are not amused, because she's basically,
she is the British Empire.
Right. She represents them.
Or the Commonwealth.
Right. Yeah. And here, in the States, we're supposed to have people represent us. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, we have people misrepresenting us. And, when you have these people with these so-called leaders, because that's what they want to be. They do want to be leaders. And it's hard for a person to go in with the motivation to be a leader. You need a leader because when they go in with that motivation, chances are they have their own ideas of what it is to lead. And it's like, well, how about you go in there with the motivation to represent us? Don't forget that you represent us. So when they go in, they end up going in, and it usually turns out they have their own agenda, and it's their own agenda that they want to lead. And I guess we have to follow along. But at the same time, if these people want to keep their leadership position, they have to represent the sentiment of the people of their constituency. And there's a lot of anger out there, and there's people out there that people want to be able to take their issues out on. They want to, and what a nice way to do that than to celebrate somebody's death, especially, a rich, elderly white woman. Yes, let's take our anger out on her. And that kind of stuff is a strategy. I know a lot of people think that the Democrat Party has become this party that hates white people. That's not exactly true. The bottom line is that the Democrats are the party of white supremacy, so much so that they think that they are better than other white people. It's that bad. That's how bad.
Yeah. I see where you're going with this.
That's how bad.
Yeah, we've got to save people of color, and we also have to show how much better we are than other white people.
And
so let's take it away.
The race narrative hasn't stopped, because what it does, Bill, they're gaslighting people to get sick of Black people. That's what they're doing. That's why they're making it look like they are the party that is against white people, because it stokes the pride and the resentment of other white people. And they throw Black people out there in front of it. And the Black people are the ones who are getting, basically people are getting tired of the Black people that Democrats are putting out in front of them.
And same for trans too. Let's come back to dignity though, okay? So let's take Queen Elizabeth out of it and take the whole monarchy out of it. And let's just go to that quality, because I think dignity is a virtue. There's something to be said about, I think probably the quality that most underlies dignity is self-confidence. Dignified people don't snap back because they don't, because the slings and arrows of trolls and so on don't bother them. I have gotten much better about not responding to negative comments, which used to bother the living daylights out of me when I was doing the blog. Jeremy Boring was the guy who said, "Hey, look, man, Zeus doesn't come down from Mount Olympus to argue with shepherds about the weather." So he appealed to my vanity, which overwhelmed my natural sense of aggression and venality. Exactly. Yeah. Well, rank hath its privileges. But that's really what it is. Is this a self-assuredness? And while we started the conversation talking about Queen Elizabeth, dignity can be possessed and is often possessed by the least among us. There is a dignity that. We'll take farmers, for example. I've always found them to be extraordinarily dignified people. Generally speaking, they're not culturally sophisticated people in terms of their ability to drop a witty bon mot at a cocktail party, but because they have enough dignity to not go to one of those. But it comes from a sense of self-assuredness, from a center. It comes from a center, a moral core, and I think that's why so many devout people are tremendously dignified individuals. You can say what you want about Gandhi, and there were an awful lot of negatives about Gandhi to go with the astonishing number of positives. But here is a guy who dressed in homespun, who intentionally looked like the poorest man on the planet, walking around with kings and royalty, and he could pull it off because he had dignity, he had that gravitas, he had that sense of assurance and confidence. And when I look at the political leadership out there now, I don't see any of that. I don't see any of it in the pop culture either, for that matter, with one or two exceptions.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I said, I don't look to these people for that. It's not something that their leadership is not something that I need them to supply to me. I just need them to go in there and represent, make sure that my God-given rights are maintained and not infringed upon. That's really all they got to do. In terms of me leading my own life or you leading your own life or anything like that, that's what's necessary. If I want perfection from anybody, I'll go to Jesus for that. I'm not looking for perfection from these people. I'm not looking for, some sort of political salvation from them or anything like that. I know they can't supply that for us. I'm not one of those who says that government's, not the problem or not the answer. Government's the problem, while waiting for some political messiah to come in and do something about all this mess. And I see too much of that, and it's very contradictory with a lot of people. The dignity, and it seems like these people are just allowing themselves to be defiled to keep their power, and and they want to be able to cater to people's selfish interest and project their selfish interest onto other people in a slander campaign, and making people dyslexic about who's doing what. I mean, the confusion out there is just, man, it's deep. It's so deep. The dignity in responding to people, I feel you. I mean, I think, the Lord said it best, don't cast your pearls before pigs. They will, if you want to go ahead and try to get in an entanglement with them, they're going to drag you in the mud. They're going to tear you apart. They're going to steal your time. You're going to, but the thing is, at some point, you got to be able to show that they're a pig. You know what I'm saying? It's like you give a person a chance. You're just like, look, I'm going to give reason to you. This is a reasonable point that I'm going to make to you. If you don't want it, and it shows that you don't want the truth, and you want to stick to your truth and all that sort of stuff, then okay, there you go. No more pearls for you. I'm going to dust off.
But that's the thing. That's the thing about dignity, though. Dignity shows the other party that they are, in fact, swine without having to insult them, right? They don't have to say a word. A dignified person in the presence of cast your pearls before swine doesn't have to say you're all a bunch of pigs. That's undignified. They simply behave on a different level, and that becomes obvious to everybody, including the pigs.
Well, it's not necessarily an insult if it's true. So it's like if a person is going to behave a certain way, if they're going to behave foolishly.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's not. Yeah. Dignity is not high on the list of Joe Biden's priorities.
Right. So it's not like these ad hoc attacks or anything like that, or just being mean spirited and just like throwing out a bunch of words. I mean, because Jesus himself did it. It's like, look, he called people like, you're a dog, you're a snake, you're a pig. And because that is how they behave.
Hmm.
low as acting like they're animals. So Jesus would call them out for that. It's not being indignant when one considers how they were to you in the first place, and you're trying to tell them the truth. And not only do they reject the truth, they insist on being a liability, and it ends up dragging you. It forces you when you're trying to say, "Hey, you don't want to do that," and they're dragging you into it with them. And it's like, look, you stink. You need to get me out of your constriction.
Fair enough. I've over time come to really love the man for a number of reasons. And there were moments when Donald Trump exhibited actually a great deal of dignity. Most recent one that I can think of was during the day or two after the Mar-a-Lago raid. He sent a message to the person who was basically persecuting him, to Merrick Garland, and said, "Listen, the country's tearing itself apart. What can I do to help? What can I do to help cool things down?" That is an extremely dignified response. That's the kind of response that's worthy of a president. And like I said, I love the man, but one of the faults of Donald Trump was that he would often allow his combative nature, which I suppose is essential if you're going to basically make a living in New York real estate, to overcome his judgment. I think most of the problems that people have with Donald Trump were about his lack of dignity, about these tweets that seem petty and so on. Like everybody else watching this, I'll take the petty tweets and so on. And the thing about Donald Trump is that I believe that deep inside, he is an extremely dignified person, but he is also a product of his environment and a product of how he ended up becoming as successful as he was. And I think if he had been more dignified, the margin of his victory would have been even greater in 2020. And after that remark to Merrick Garland, I realized I hope he cultivates this more. I hope he goes to his instincts to be above these things, because when he is in those moments, he's really remarkable. And I think it's the pettiness that destroys the presidential dignity. And of all the things, not of all the things, but one of the many things that I would like to see back would be a sense of dignity in the Oval Office, which is not constantly descending to things like what we saw in front of Independence Hall, where the president essentially has a conniption fit and pounds his fists and calls half the country traitors because they don't fall in line with him. It is a quality that, to me, has no downside. Ronald Reagan was a dignified person because Ronald Reagan was a gentleman. That's a term that you don't hear often anymore. But in the British Empire, in the world that Queen Elizabeth was born into, and was the world that has passed during the course of her lifetime, the ideal among British manhood generally was to behave like a gentleman, was to behave as a person who was in control of their emotions, as a person who was above pettiness and emotional childishness and so on. And one of the truest things ever said about the British is that the British are never rude except for on purpose. And I just find that quality to be something that really is lacking, and that just makes you a more effective leader. I get your point about not looking for a leader, and I get your point about not following a leader, and certainly you can have a sort of a messianic view towards politicians, which is dangerous for you and the Republic. Mm. But with all of that said, somebody still has to be sitting in the White House, and somebody still has to be in Buckingham Palace and so on. And one of the reasons that I think Charles in England is so less loved than both his mother Elizabeth and his son William is that Charles, especially with Camilla and then some of his environmental comments, is a guy who doesn't seem to have a whole lot of dignity. I think he probably did once. It's been a tough life for him, actually. Tough life being a Prince of Wales, poor guy.
Yeah, I reckon a lot of people would love to trade out that toughness for the toughness that they're dealing with. But I want to get back to like Donald Trump being on Twitter. A lot of people didn't want Donald Trump to be on Twitter and my wanting Donald Trump to not be on Twitter wasn't for the same reason as anybody else. I just don't like the idea of being dependent on these platforms of our enemies because
couldn't agree more.
Yeah, but
the only reason he was on Twitter was because the networks wouldn't cover him. It was the only way he had to talk to the American people.
Exactly, and that's where a lot of the American people were. They're on Twitter. So I mean, I totally agree. It's like, look, man, go where the people are and talk to them, and that's what he did.
That's why we're on YouTube,
right? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that Reagan did. People listen to the radio. I'm gonna do radio. So. And yeah, we absolutely, want to be, we want to keep the high road. Don't ever want to be petulant. Some people do need to be responded to with force, with a forceful word, but not a mean-spirited word.
Not a mean-spirited. There you go.
Don't be mean-spirited. I mean, even we did a production, D is for Dungeon, where we're making a case that, hey man, we got to ridicule these people. We're gonna call them out, and we're gonna bust out that Shakespearean snapbag, and we're gonna pull out all sorts of snaps on. Is it mean spirited? Is it petulant? No. I mean, I think it's if anything. I mean, I can see where they're offended by everything. They may find it offensive.
Yeah, but it was playful and fun. It was, and that was the mood we definitely were both going for.
Yes, so it's not about being petulant or anything like that. But it's like, okay, two can play at that game, but I'm not going to stoop to your level. You definitely want to keep the high road, and even as far as military campaigns go, that the high ground is where you want to be. So these kinds of things where you do want to keep your integrity, you want to keep your head cool and stuff like that. Sometimes people want to get out there cursing and snorting and all that sort of stuff. That's I think I've been blessed to have people pretty good head as far as that goes, where I don't resort to that, where I got to start cursing and stuff at people. But I'll let people know, it's like, look, man, you're causing some problems here, and I call it out. But to go just getting like wishing harm on people, or getting a cursing and just being profane and stuff like that, it's like, no, that's not necessary.
Just to close this up for myself, I may suffer from I certainly don't suffer from excess dignity, but I suffer from an it's not really suffering. I part of my character is over awareness of dignity, personal dignity. I think that comes from having British parents, going to British schools, but the main thing is growing up as the son of a hotel manager. When I was at the hotel, I had to behave like I was the son of the hotel manager. Any sense of entitlement, and I mean any sense of entitlement, like get me a drink, or that was the end of the world for me, and rightfully so. So we ended up being really polite kids and stuff. And what I find is that put a respect for rules and doing things the way they're supposed to be done, put a respect for that into me that may actually almost be a little bit too much. When I was 12, 13 years old, and we were doing sleepovers and stuff, I was sleeping over at my friend Steve's house. There were 4 or 5 of us walking around the neighborhood. It was real late. It was like, it might have been 11:30 or something. And there was a shortcut back to his house, just to go past the side of a person's house, jump over a fence, and you're in his backyard. And that meant going through this other person's property and hopping over the fence. And so they all just did it. I couldn't do it. It was like there was a force field there. I could not do it. So I walked around, the long way. And I find that the things that really, really torque me more than anything are situations when people behave selfishly, without respect for the rules. People who drive slow in the fast lane, people who cut in, at the last minute in traffic, that kind of thing, just really, really, really torques me out. This is the world we live in, I guess. I try to maintain as much dignity as we can anyway, because I do think it is an actual virtue. And I think one of the greatest examples of dignity has left the stage. And on some level, I think I'm happy for Queen Elizabeth that she doesn't get to see more of what appears to be coming before we get back to some sort of civility and decency and dignity in our society. That'll do it for this edition of The Virtue Signal, which is made possible by the extraordinarily dignified members at BillWhittle.com who pay for the show so that you don't have to. And we'd love to have you join us. And we keep saying this every week, but we mean it every week. We are up against enormous, enormous forces, financial forces, that are doing their very best to tear us down. And we're doing our very best to keep it going. So there's that. For Alfonso Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle, and we'll see you next time here on The Virtue Signal.